All right, is this thing on? I'm live. I am live. All right, let me get back up here to the comments, give you folks some time to get the notification. I will just mention actually early on here, I'm supposed to be doing a live stream tomorrow with Daniel. And actually, let me turn the internet off on here so I don't get notifications. Yeah, Daniel, I'm not sure if you folks remember, he was a guy that I talked to at another time, originally from Argentina. We talked basically about Javier Milei, the libertarian, who's now in office down there and apparently cleaning up some mess down in Argentina. And anyways, it was me, him, and then there was another time with when I was with Tim Moen, talking to Tim Moen, and Daniel was involved. Anyways, we were supposed to have a live stream tomorrow. We're just going to postpone it. He's gotten ill, and we're just going to postpone it for another time. I'm not sure what that time is going to be as of yet. It's to be determined. But in the meantime, I do wish Daniel all the best, and hopefully his recovery comes quickly. Now, I will actually just more do some little house cleaning here, not just to let you all know too that another announcement I'll be making shortly. He's gone away for this week. I could have actually done a live stream with him today, I believe. It was short notice, and I had already had this one set up, and I think this is really, really important. So I didn't really want to, put this one off and rearrange the whole thing. And like I say, it's kind of short notice. But anyways, we're going to have a conversation. The gentleman from the Gray Matters podcast. Actually, let me pull that up here on my. Here we go. Yeah, let's click on. Where are we at here? Yeah, so anyways, like I say, it's a new message request. All right, we'll save that for another time. But like I say, we're going to have a conversation. This one is going to be about it's really important, this kind of subject matter. As you folks know, I obviously always deal with the events of the day, or at least the ones that I find that are most pressing or concerning, or in particular have something to do with liberty itself, right? And individual liberty as a libertarian. And I like to bring the philosophical, the principled lens, forget the politics, right? There's lots of pundits out there that'll bring politics and the left versus right, and, us versus them, red versus blue, all that stuff, the constant binary choices of you got to pick one master or the other, Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones kind of conversation, right? But, I like to point out the fact that, no, you should be thinking about being a free human being, right? That's kind of the focus I bring to the equation. But once again, we all have to acknowledge that this modern world we live in today didn't happen by chance or just, luck or anything. No, this is something that if you know your history and if you understand, why these threats constantly are like ever present in not just our lives, but the lives of our, grandparents, great-great-grand, for millennial, for probably, if you want to go far enough back, for all of human history. In reality, there always has been people who want to dominate, coerce, control, or crush others, to just basically dominate over them. And once again, I understand, and you folks probably understand too, the big thing for me today is the reason why, a lot of us, actually, it's not just me, a lot of people who, maybe especially Gen Xers who grew up, kind of fallen away from Christianity. In particular, I'll speak for myself because that's the background that I was raised in a predominantly Christian family. And I got to tell you, even, once you get into your teens and stuff, it's kind of, it wasn't cool, right? Or whatever in the day to be religious, and like I say, a lot of us, and because of modern science and the way it was all presented to us, which I will say improperly, right, is, it was one or the other, right? Now, fast forward to today, I understand that science is very important to understand the objective world and the things around us, the tangible world, or even actually in some areas, not even the tangible world, but the actual world around us, right? But when it comes to ethics and morality, this is the part where, I mean, you just got to understand, and I'm coming more and more to understand why, you know, having a figure such as God, right? That genuine universal ethic in terms of, especially in particular, Jesus Christ and the teachings of Jesus Christ, and brought the individual scope upon it. But if we had been taught this kind of stuff proper, and maybe some were, right? But it didn't seem like it was something that was very well known when I was growing up, that's for sure. But if we had been taught about these things, much more in a much more nuanced and um, psychological and how it pertains to human flourishing and freedom. If we had brought those kind of things, to the forefront of understanding this stuff, whereas when I was growing up, it was just, you had a preacher at the pulpit basically telling you, just like in school, basically what to think, not how to think, right? It was always jammed down your throat and you couldn't question anything. And as someone like myself who has a very inquisitive mind, even back when I was a child, that just didn't sit well with me, which is why I gravitated away, as with a lot of my fellow Canadians, away from religion. But I definitely understand today, why it's so important to have, the concept of God that's above and beyond anything in terms of in the human realm, because we all understand, and that was another major teaching of the Bible, that all humans, are sinners. We're all fallible, which is why you don't want to have or place so much authority in the hands of other human individuals. And that's something, like I said, we're going to talk about in terms of our conversation. And he'll be coming on actually my show. I'm hoping to get a chance to go on his show one of these days as well. Like I say, his is called Gray Matter Podcast. But basically, we're going to be talking about, regarding belief systems and God, as the basis for ethics or morality. Anyways, like I say, I just wanted to mention that because I got some things upcoming, and I'm really really looking forward to these kinds of conversations. And the whole thing with, of course, with Daniel was, how do we, like, more or less discussing arts and entertainment, like some of those cultural drivers. This is another area, a really important area, and something that you folks have heard me talk about for quite a little while now. And I wish more and more people would talk about that. Although I will admit, I'm starting to see more people kind of delving into that realm, because that's the thing. Everyone knows the quote by now, or a lot of people know the quote by now, that politics is downstream of culture. That phrase attributed to Andrew Breitbart, I believe it was. So a lot of people understand that, especially people who are standing up in defense of their freedoms and their liberties, regardless if you're Canadian or American or whatever country you're from. But, if you don't have, like I say, well, as far as I'm concerned, it genuinely, this kind of stuff, it starts at home. But where do you get this kind of information, right? Sure, it'd be nice to think that all parents were all wise and knowledgeable, and just overflowing with wisdom in terms of understanding what it is to be a free human being, what's it mean to have liberty, to have freedoms, to have inherent and inalienable rights. But that's not the case. So where do we get these messages, these grand narratives from? Obviously the Bible is one of them, religion. But another key driver, another area where it's very dominant, and it was when I was growing up, not so much today. You're getting the opposite of it seemingly today in a lot of the arts and entertainment in terms of movies and music and television. But that is an area where, you can get these kind of messages in a much more seamless and entertaining manner. And I think this is something that's another area where it's really, really important. So two, pretty major topics of conversation that's going to be upcoming that I'm really looking forward to. Anyway, so before we get to this, so not sure if you folks have seen this, and then I've got a couple videos I want to play, because nobody can pretend in this modern world that this kind of stuff, this kind of knowledge, the madness of the crowd, as Douglas Murray would say. Well, he had a book that basically that was the title of the book, right? But it's not, something that only a few people know. A lot of people understand and have understood for decades that people, especially when you put them in large groups, can be quite easily manipulated to do some very, very terrible things. And yeah, I'm not even going to have to go back to referencing, the kind of things that happened under Nazism or fascism or communism or socialism, all these collectivist ideologies. But yeah, even in terms of things such as, the Stanley Milgram experiment, the Stanford prison experiment. And yeah, I got a couple of those videos on standby just to kind of refresh everyone's memory and just how easy it is, to psychologically manipulate and influence people to do some terrible, terrible things, right? And like I said, this is well understood. And of course, for those of us who, didn't go with the program, so to speak, in terms of the whole COVID-19 narrative and the way everything was jammed down our throats. Yeah, we felt that not only did we have the anecdotal experiences or be able to things that we can reference in terms of the Stanley Milgram experiment or a lot of the collective ideologies or the Stanford prison experiment, but we got to actually live it in real life. And fortunately, yeah, it was pretty rough, but fortunately, most of us come out, at least relatively unscathed in comparison. But once again, the threat is still omnipresent and around us. And we really, really, really got to take these kinds of things seriously, because the same kind of people who tried to impose themselves and their will on us, for those years, they're still around and they're still seeking to dominate and control in a myriad of ways. So anyways, let me bring up, actually, just wanted to check, make sure everything's good. Yeah, looks like everything's good over there on the old YouTube. Let me just close a couple of these up here. Check that one. Oh, and of course, over on X. Yeah, I'll close that one up. Oh, actually, it's funny. I'm seeing CSIS is trending because that's what we're going to be discussing. So I'll kind of I'll keep X open here because I see a lot of people are starting to comment on this. And that's why I wanted to do this live stream today. And I'm glad to see that it's actually trending over there on Twitter. Actually, let me bring that up here real quick. Might as well bring this on the screen. Like I said, that's impressive to see that this is actually going viral here. So as you can see, I just clicked on it, and this was Megan Murphy. Let me throw the old glasses on here. Are you on Glue CBC News? I have been threatened with extreme violence for years in Canada simply for advocating for the sex-based rights of women and girls. Not once have you covered the threats and protests against me sympathetically. Well, of course not. Of course not. Right? We know it is definitely an us versus them, and there's a certain subsect of society that's the protected class, right? And those who don't fit in that, well, you're the outcast. And Megan Murphy seems to understand that, and we know what camp she's in. And then we got James Lindsay. That's that guy from yeah, he's really big into the woke stuff. James Lindsay, right? That's the same guy, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's him. 467,000 followers, pro-American, anti-communist, based as fuck. Right? CSIS, the Canadian equivalent of the CIA, is pulling the risk of extreme violence card against the rejection of queer theory in Canada or Canadian society, which is enormous public support. Of course they are. They're losing. Beware of false flags. Stay good. And then we got Cosmin Zasurza from True North News. Canada's top spy agency, CSIS Canada, has an anti-terrorism unit monitoring parental rights groups. A report compares those who oppose radical gender ideology to neo-Nazis. Actually, I might as well give these a like, right? Might as well. I always like to do that. Show at least bare minimum support for people, others who are standing up. So you got Billboard Chris there. You got anyway. So basically, everyone's kind of referencing the same material. But now that is just one aspect. I will just say that the whole LGBTQ thing. That is just one aspect of this. So let me actually bring up the article and let me reference that one. This is from Global News. Yeah, Global News. Yeah, Global News. So let me just read this article for you folks, and you can see what exactly what we're all kind of referring to here, because I found this to be quite disturbing, to say the least. I would play the video in it, but weirdly enough, it's kind of not. I don't know. Sometimes you get these things where they embed an article with a video that doesn't even seem to be properly pertaining to it. So we'll just move beyond the video. Anyways, this particular, and of course, this will be linked in the description of the live stream. This particular article from Global News is freedom. Oh, wait now. In quotation mark, right? Like, what the fuck, anyways? The fact that, and even how many times have you heard those in the establishment media or some of the pundit or political class calling it, in terms of people standing up for their freedom, like the truckers in particular, and their many supporters in this country, they call it the so-called freedom convoy. So-called. Well, no, they're standing up for their fucking freedoms. There's no so-called about it, but that's, like the rhetoric once again, and the downplaying of people's concerns and their fear of what the state has been trying to impose on them, like to downplay that or to disregard that or disparage that in such ways that has been done so many times in the media. Yeah, it's vile. And the media, they wonder why they're losing support hand over fist, right? I can't imagine why, right? Anyways, the freedom movement fighting against perceived government overreach. So this is a report from CSIS. Perceived government overreach. I mean, come on. Even Mosley, the judge, the federal judge said that it was unconstitutional, unreasonable, and infringed on our charter rights and freedoms, right? The invocation of the Emergencies Act. I mean, how the fuck would CSIS, like, I don't know how they can come up with this nonsense where they suggest that it's just perceived government overreach. No, it's genuine, 100% certainty that the government, not just, I mean, that's pretty, even that alone is downplaying the fact that, once again, look what they did, right? You've seen, I mean, I won't rehash. You've seen all the videos, you've seen all the testimony, the footage, the personal experiences that you might have been there because you've been experienced yourself, because you might have been there, the seizures of bank accounts, the imprisonment of peaceful protesters with trumped up charges. I mean, something as vague as mischief, right? I mean, we all know what transpired. I mean, if you don't, now in February 2024, well, you've been, get your head out of the sand. First of all, I don't know how you're still breathing, but we all know that it wasn't perceived. It was genuine. It was real. And it continues to be so, because once again, the very same Trudeau liberals who invoked that Emergency Act to target peaceful protesters, right? And to bully, intimidate, and just, well, like I say, you've seen what happened. They're still out there and they have not relented, right? They are still looking to dominate over us. And that they're still very much pissed off the fact that there are at least a small group of fringe minority of Canadians like myself and like yourself who are willing, have the courage of their conviction to stand in full defense of the freedoms. And you know what? CSIS, right? I mean, first of all, I'll get to the what CSIS really, to be worried about the fact that Canadians are standing up for the freedoms. I mean, why are you targeting? Why aren't you going after? Why are you writing reports to target, like I said, Canadians who are genuinely and rightfully concerned about the massive infringements on our inherent and inalienable rights and freedoms? Anyway, so this was Jim Bronskill, the Canadian Press. This was done on, and of all days, right? Which is, what is it? Of course, another anniversary, right? Wasn't the 14th when Trudeau invoked, right? 2 years ago to the day. Wow, right? The Emergencies Act on Valentine's Day of all days. What, I guess maybe they were thinking that in this particular one, most people would be too busy to be paying attention to this stuff. Well, I mean, I was busy spending a lot of the day with my wife, but yeah, I'm not going to just ignore the rest of the world or what's taking place too. I've got time to do both. Anyways, so let me just read here a little bit. The loosely knit collective that vocally opposed COVID-19 health measures. Oh, by the way, just let me know there actually before I continue on. How's the volume look there on the I might have to turn it up just a bit. Just want to make sure it's loud enough on the microphone so that you folks can hear me just fine. Yeah, actually, let me get into the comments. Oh, all right. Yeah, that sounds pretty good, at least on my end. At least on my end. Wonder where the volume is at set on this thing. Anyways, yeah, hopefully the sound is fine there. So actually, maybe I will just continue on reading this. So I'll just start over here. The loosely knit collective that vocally opposed COVID-19 health measures have morphed into a movement waging a broader fight against perceived government overreach, in quotation marks, says a newly released assessment from Canada's spy agency, right? Canada's spy agency is worrying about people who are genuinely standing up for their freedoms and who are vocally opposed to it. Vocally opposed. Vocally, right? Which is just speech. It's just speech. It's just speech, Caesars, right? The Canadian Security Intelligence Services analytical brief traces the evolution of the freedom movement that began to emerge following the early 2022 protests that paralyzed downtown Ottawa and key Canada-U.S. border points. Oh, you mean the people who were, standing up for the fact that, the Trudeau Liberals, basically, especially the truckers in particular, who were, destroying their livelihood, taking away their jobs and their careers and making it next to impossible to feed their family? You mean those people? Or were trying to be coerced into taking an experimental vaccine that had no basis or any proven facts that it was even going to do what it was claimed to do. And now that we have had the time and some hindsight to look back on it, we were right all along that, yeah, they never prevented you from getting COVID and never prevented you from transmitting it. So once again, what was the point? What was the intention of the mandates, if not just for big government to use the heavy hand of the state to impose their will on the masses? In early February 2022, the streets around Parliament Hill were jammed with protesters, many in large trucks that rolled into the Capitol beginning in late January. Initially promoted as a demonstration against COVID-19 health restrictions, including lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Lockdowns and vaccine mandates, CSIS. I hope somebody from CSIS is paying attention here, right? Yeah, lockdowns, right? So imposing and restricting on Canadians' rights to mobility, to go out, get some fresh air, to just live as free human beings as we're supposed to do. And vaccine mandates. I mean, come on, CSIS. You got a fucking dictionary, right? You have access to a dictionary. Mandates. These were forced and thrust upon Canadians. Once again, and acknowledged by a federal judge as well. Well, acknowledged by anyone with any common decency or understanding of morality and ethics that, yes, forcing people to undergo medical experiments. Well, I mean, hello, the Nuremberg trial. Anyone ever read that shit? Or, hey, if you don't know how to read, at least maybe watch a documentary or two or a video as it pertains to what was said during the Nuremberg trial. Because of the kind of things that took place prior. The gathering attracted people with various grievances against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his government. Exactly 2 years ago, the federal government responded by invoking the Emergencies Act, which allowed for temporary measures to include the prohibition of public assemblies. So, yeah, to prevent people from peacefully protesting, which is once again an infringement on our inherent and inalienable rights, which allow direction to banks to freeze assets and a ban on support for participants. So even if you were just supporting right? Not actively even protesting, which of course it should be already something that should not ever be able to be taken away. That's the point of your rights and freedoms. And anyone that suggests, well, it was during the pandemic, so that's the time. No, your rights matter the most when there's an actual threat to them. That is really the most important time for people to understand. This is when you need to understand how important your rights are, is when there are threats. When there's no threats to your freedoms, not as much as an important factor to most people, right? But when there's a direct and imminent threat to your freedoms, your freedoms, your rights, your inherent fundamental rights, that's when it matters most. And just like I've said many times before, freedom and liberty is the greater good. The Canadian press used the Access to Information Act to obtain the April 2023 CSIS brief defining the freedom movement. Although they got quotations and then even smaller quotations for the holy shit, and related assessments of what the spy service calls ideologically motivated violent extremism. First of all, and you're not going to see it here, I've already read this article, but you would think when people are talking about ideologically motivated violent extremism, I mean, think about it, not even just violence or an act of violence. Right? They don't even have anything like that they're going to have in this article, right? To show, see what we mean? This is what we're talking about, right? These are the examples, right? No examples of that, but in particular, ideologically motivated violent extremism. And of course, there's no reference to that because it did not exist. It does not exist. And to pretend like this is fucking some serious Minority Report kind of shit. What? They're going to predict that is going to happen in the future? Really? Why? Why would you be so secure in that knowledge, CSIS? You got something planned, do you? Or something that you, your government officials and your fellow Gestapo in the RCMP or the Trudeau Liberals or the other aspects of the ruling class got something whooped up in the future that you're like, oh, fuck, if they were mad about what we did before during the Emergency Act, wait till they find out what we're going to do to them in the future. Is that what kind of thinking's going on there? CSIS? While a movement may collectively hold extreme views, and what the fuck are the extreme views? Like, once again, just one or two examples would be nice. Canadian press or CSIS, anybody. Can you just give me some fucking examples? Bunch of propagandists, bunch of bootlickers, bunch of mindless order followers. Yeah, and none of you folks, that's the thing. I mean, how fucking stupid or corrupted do you have to be to think that you're ever going to be perceived at any point in time, not just now, but in the future, no matter how many people you can trick and convince and propagandize now, but you got to be thinking a little bit further ahead that, you're never on the good side of things when you're trying to impose your will on people and trying to tyrannize them or supporting as such. Never is that the case. With a movement, while a movement may collectively hold extreme views, only a small portion of those involved may be willing to engage in serious violence, CSIS says. May be willing. Once again, making some wild predictions there, right? Sure, they might have been saying the same thing about the whole convoy protest as they were rolling down the highways headed to Ottawa from all parts of this country. Oh, there's going to be serious violence. Didn't happen, did it? But even then, they just doubled down on this kind of rhetoric. And you just got to think about the kind of people that they're appealing to, the kind of people that will only read something like Global News or CBC or Associated Press or CTV, the kind of people that are so thoroughly indoctrinated by the establishment media, right? And their parroting of the ruling class narrative that, of course, they won't question it. But that's the thing with these outfits. Do you not realize that, more and more people, in particular younger people, not just waking up, but moving online where you actually have access to alternative sources of information, right? So once again, I don't know, like I say, ineptness, corruptness, I mean, it just seems to be so dominant and so thoroughly entrenched in the current rulers establishment, CSIS, once again, the RCMP. I mean, it's just unbelievable how far this country has fallen in terms of these institutions, right? The intelligence service points to the constitutional protection of freedom of expression and stresses that it does not investigate lawful protest unless it is carried out in conjunction with threat-related activities. Well, what are these threat-related activities? Once again, example, please. As many public health measures began to be lifted by early spring 2022, CSIS observed individuals broadening the scope of their grievances and identifying as members of the freedom movement. Once again, listen, yeah, I'm part of that. I'll wear that as a badge of honor. And to think, what was the whole point of CSIS or the RCMP? Aren't you folks supposed to be there to protect the freedoms of Canada or to inform people in positions of any threats to the freedoms of Canada? And to then try to pretend by using these quotation marks that what, freedom's a bad thing now, huh? I mean, how corrupted do you have to get when you're suggesting that freedom or anyone that's standing up for freedom are what, the bad guys? Really? And using that kind of verbiage as such, like I say, wow. Is it a cry for help, CSIS? Yeah, is it? I don't know. The change was also evident to those who saw and heard flag-waving protesters who lingered around the Parliament buildings and gathered on highway overpasses. Oh, no! Oh, the humanity! The freedom movement builds on the fundamental narratives of the anti-public health measurements movement. Anti-public health. Oh, man. See, the way they misrepresent. No, nobody's against public health, right? To pretend or suggest that, oh, yeah, we're just against public health. No, we're against, mandates, those unelected bureaucrats trying to impose their will on us, trying to force us, to coerce us, to prevent us, things that the policies that they suggested governments enact that not just infringed on our inherent inalienable rights and our charter rights, but caused a lot of people to lose their jobs, their occupation, their livelihoods, and to cause so much anguish. And that's not even taking into account, the death and all the other things that happened as a consequence of the just all that took place under the kind of tyranny that Canadians suffered, right? Under the Trudeau regime, with the help and backing of the rest of the establishment. Don't make no mistake about that. Yeah, the Conservatives might be coming a little bit late now, right? And realize, no, wait now, I guess one of us got to pretend that we're on the side of freedom, right? But make no mistake, and don't forget about the fact that they basically all supported the rampant tyranny. There was conservative governments in power, right? In New Brunswick, in Ontario, a lot of the provinces were conservative governments and did the lockdowns, the mandates, you know the whole spiel, right? So both sides of the political divide were more than willing to tyrannize Canadians, right? Under the guise of, but we're doing it for your own good, for safety, right? It's for your own safety. Oh, including opposition to globalization and suspicion of pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. So, yes, globalization. And if you know what that actually means and entails, yes, Canadians are not just, a lot of us are not just sick and tired of being ruled over by a very corrupted and elitist ruling class in our own countries, but yeah, not real big fans of having that scope, opened up to encompass what? People on the world stage, these unelected bureaucrats in, things such as the United Nations or the World Economic Forum, or what's the other one? The myriad of these acronyms, these three-letter agencies, or these, designated entities that are usually just quasi-government entities that are seeking to once again rule over us, to impose their will on us. So yeah, people should be concerned about that. Matter of fact, you should be concerned about that, CSIS. And suspicion of pharmaceutical companies. Well, once again, Robert F. Kennedy talks about this profusely, right? And has the facts to back him up. But yeah, these pharmaceutical companies are not just heavily corrupted based on our opinions or perspectives, but the fines, the global leading, the largest fines ever doled out to any companies are these pharmaceutical companies for the things that they've already done in the past that were deemed either illegal, unconstitutional, or immoral, or unethical. That's fact. These are all facts. These aren't speculation or perceived threats. These are very real things. And of course, Canadians should be concerned about them. With a heavy focus on alleged government infringement of personal liberties, the CSIS analysis says. With a heavy focus on alleged government infringement of personal liberties. Once again, CSIS, the federal judge Mosley, he even said himself. So why are you suggesting they're alleged? They are no longer alleged. They are now, there's now legal precedent, and it's known as fact that the government did infringe on Canadians' personal liberties. While this perceived tyranny, and I mean, first of all, I don't even need a judge, nor should anyone need a judge. This is the thing with understanding what being a free human being is all about and what inherent and inalienable rights are supposed to mean to every human being. If you had that kind of civic knowledge, if Canadians had that kind of baseline civic knowledge or understanding of what liberties are even all about and what they mean and how they come about and all that, then there would be no excuse for anyone, whether it's in CSIS or anybody in the Canadian population, to suggest that, what was done was not or may not have been infringement. I didn't need to wait for a judge to tell me that. I knew that long beforehand. I'm appreciative, somewhat grateful that Mosley actually, had the courage of his convictions to actually acknowledge that, yeah, people like Bennett were right all along. That's nice. But once again, didn't need that. Wasn't required to know the difference between right from wrong. Sad part of it is a lot of our fellow Canadians are still in the dark in terms of what that is. While this perceived tyranny is widespread across the movement, or other narratives are becoming increasingly common among adherents, the brief says, citing opposition to the LGBTQ plus community, specifically drag story times and inclusion of material in public school curriculums. So this is something that CSIS, Canada's spy agency. Think about it. Canada's spy agency. And yeah, we'll get to what their mandate is, right? I'm going to give you, and it's going to be linked in the description, what the mandate of CSIS is supposed to be. But rather than sticking to their mandate, no, they're concerned about if people becoming increases common against the brief saying opposition to, and it's not to the LGBT community or plus whatever community. It's not opposition to those, who want to identify as whatever one of those letters, right? No, it's not opposition to them. Most Canadians, whether they like them or not, like, okay, well, you do you and I'll do me in terms of that stuff, right? That is a representation of most or all sane Canadians, right? Which I would suggest is the overwhelming majority of people. But what they're against is that kind of stuff being jammed down the throats of their children. That's what they're against. And why not? Right? It is not anyone else's duty, or should they ever have the authority to want to impose or override not just what you want to call parental rights, but yeah, the ability for parents to raise their kids, their children, the way they deem fit. Right? As long as you're not causing harm to them in terms of using violence and all that stuff, right? But yeah, no, the state does not have the authority to dictate or control how you raise your children. The kind of children you want, the kind of people you want them to be in adulthood. And especially in particular, in terms of in the education system. It is not the duty of educators to be teaching about this kind of stuff, regardless of your perspective. Stick to academics. That's what, and indoctrination of people into the cult of statism, of course. That's what, the state curriculum and the education system is supposed to be primarily about. Yeah, and it even says here, drag story times inclusion of material in public school curriculums. Perceived increase in global control over Canada by international institutions such as the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. So yeah, once again, this is all based on not perceived threats, right? but very real ones. All you have to do is listen to some of these fools at the World Economic Forum or at the UN and the way they talk, the rhetoric they use, the kind of things they suggest. And yes, that's not just perceived. That, once again, is a very real thing. And what? Canadians shouldn't be concerned about that? Communism. Well, imagine that. Imagine that. What? It's a bad thing. CSIS needs to study these things, needs to fill out a report on the fact that Canadians, or at least a lot of Canadians, or a substantial, or at least a certain cohort of Canadians, are against communism. Really? That's something you need to worry about, CSIS? Really? Really, huh? And the concept of 15-minute cities on the basis that planning easily navigable communities is a plot to restrict mobility rights and create a mass surveillance state. Yeah? Yeah? Point? Now, once again, before I continue on here, let me just bring this off. I will read the rest. But let me just show you here, folks. So this is what CSIS mandate is. Based on Canada, so the government of Canada, their very own wording on their website. All right, here we go. Mandate. CSIS is Canada's security and intelligence service. Its role is to investigate activities suspected of constituting threats to the security of Canada, right? So you would think that, the security of Canada, you would predominantly and primarily think, well, that's foreign threats, foreign actors, foreign governments, foreign spies, right? That should be what anyone would think of or perceive as what this wording means, right? Not, people who stand up for the freedom against genuine and sincere overreach and unconstitutional acts imposed and thrust on them by the governments, whether it's the federal or provincial, and to report these to the government of Canada. CSIS may also take measures to reduce threats to the security of Canada in accordance with well-defined legal requirements and ministerial direction. CSIS collects and analyzes threat-related information, which is typically disseminated to government partners through intelligence reports and other intelligence products. Key threats include, so here's the examples of these threats that they're talking about: terrorism, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, espionage, foreign interference, and cyber tampering affecting critical infrastructure. So once again, all those things, terrorism, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, none of these things pertain or have anything to do with, whether it's the trucker movement, the freedom convoy, or parents who want to stand up for their children or protect their children from some of this woke ideology that, once again, is being thrust and forced upon them throughout these education/indoctrination centers. Terrorism, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, espionage, right? Once again, nothing there that should be even closely associated with, once again, the trucker movement or the truckers' protests or anyone that's standing up for freedom or part of the freedom movement in Canada. Foreign interference, once again, nope. Cyber tampering affecting critical infrastructure, nope. And is there any examples that anyone can point to, whether it's in CSIS or the RCMP or anyone in the ruling class or in the media that could point to that would even meet any of these definitions? No. So why in the hell is CSIS, because based on their mandate, well, they're not sticking to their mandate. Now, here are they. They're actually doing something that, as far as I'm concerned, is illegal and unethical. And I hope there's some lawyers watching this live stream that, yes, and I'm proud to see that there's a bunch of the people that in the Freedom Convoy who are actually taking not just Chrystia Freeland, but Trudeau and a lot of these hacks in the government and the ruling class, the current ruling establishment, taking them to court and charging them with actual, these things that they've done against the Canadian people. But this is another thing where, once again, they're not meeting the legal definition of their mandate by talking about or targeting, what they perceive as Canada's freedom movement or anything that they've described so far within this article. I'll bring this back on here, actually. So let me continue down here. CSIS is looking at the potential of such narratives to lead to disruption and violence, said Barbara Perry, director of the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism at Ontario Tech University. And yeah, I got a link to this Center on Hate. It should be Center for Hate, because they're the ones that seem to be the haters. They're the ones that seem to constantly want to use government, right? They're the ones that create the narrative, the political cover, for government, which is the big, giant proverbial gun in the room, and threatening, waving it around, threatening Canadians who are acting peacefully, right? So who's the real haters? Who's the one not just trying to bring hate and division, but actually soliciting violence as their means to an end? Yeah, it's these very people. Like, this is the kind of how Orwellian things truly are today, when they use this kind of rhetoric to describe themselves, that the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism should be the Center for, right? They're of the opinion that these are the kinds of grievances, if you will, that are likely to bring people to the brink of violence, Perry said in an interview. I mean, what does that even mean? Read Man's Search for Meaning, right? Viktor Frankl. Anybody, if you dominate, coerce, control, right? Treat like pure garbage, oppress, imprison, tyrannize. If you do all those things, every human being has a breaking point, which is why, government should be so minimal in nature that those threats cease to exist. But no, what is the answer always? More government, more threats, more violence. And then they wonder why some people have the potential to become violent as a response to constant violence or threats thereof imposed upon them. Yeah. And if you don't, well, then what kind of country do you think you're living in, where people will just constantly take that for all of eternity, right, throughout their entire lives? I know one thing. I don't want to live in a country like that, and neither should anyone that works at CSIS. CSIS defines an ideologically motivated violent extremist movement as a loosely organized collection of people linked by virtual and offline networks who share who share distinct identity. Sounds like CSIS is identifying government or political parties, right? Because those, if you think of what is a political party, right? What is government? But an ideologically motivated violent extremist movement as a loosely organized collection of people linked by virtual and offline networks who share a distinct identity, right? Sounds like a political party to me. Sounds like those who want to form government to be your rulers, right? CSIS should be directing their attention, if they're going to do domestic stuff, right, instead of worrying about foreign threats or actors or governments or terrorists. Now, if you're going to focus or go against your mandate, start focusing inward, right? Maybe you should be focusing on the people who are tyrannizing others, who are using their ideologies, right, to impose their wills on others, and more than willing to use the full force and might of the state to do so. Such movements have adversarial relations with clearly identified opponents and aim to carry out, resist, or undo social change, the intelligence service brief says. So once again, that's just a perfect description for government or political parties. A movement does not have a formal or legitimate leader, but rather is guided by the people who join it in more or less spontaneous fashion, CSIS says. Perry said the move towards these looser individual-based movements is a worrying trend in some respects, because it's much more difficult to identify which of those hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, is going to commit an act of extreme violence. Once again, just think about the rhetoric contained within that. So yeah, of course, this will be linked in the description below. Anyways, I do want to get to a few comments here before it gets too far down. Let's see. Hey, 506 Adventure. Hey, what's going on, 506 Adventure? Hi to you. Really appreciate that. 506, obviously, someone from my own neck of the woods here in NB. That's our area code for those who aren't New Brunswickers themselves. Actually, I can read those without my glasses. I see the Mad Catter's in the house. Thank you, Mad Catter for joining the stream. Really appreciate that. Justin Turdo, right on. Thank you, sir. Morning, hosers. Hey, hoser. Yeah, hey. Can you turn up the volume a bit, please? Yes, sir. I think I already did that, right? So should be good to go. Actually, I think I'm kind of over seeing it going up into the red there a little bit. So maybe I'll turn it down just a little bit. I think I might have turned it up a little bit too much. But anyways, thanks for mentioning that there, Justin Turtle. Let me stick it a little bit closer to me here. You know, in reality, I could be moderating this myself if I was willing to put on a headpiece or an earpiece. Now, maybe one of these days I should, but I don't really care much for it. But if you do, I guess if I just put an earbud, maybe I should buy even those wireless earbuds, so I don't have to have wires hooked up to me, right? But if I did have at least one earbud, I can kind of pay attention to my mic levels. That's actually the main reason, I believe, other than to get stuff fed into their ear. But that's one of the main reasons why people do, tend to wear the earphones and headphones, so they can kind of moderate their level. And yeah, actually, maybe I should start doing that anyways. What creates an outlaw? Exactly. Anyone that's challenging, right, the status quo or the establishment, which, yeah, usually and many times, not always, but many times throughout history, are the people that are genuine, the ones that are standing in defiance of very heavy-handed governments, or those who want to tyrannize them, right? That typically is the case. It's not a one size fits all label that is going to be applicable for everyone, right? But yeah, typically, you got to think in Stalinist Russia, or Nazi Germany in particular. Those two examples are good ones. Yet you kind of wanted to be an outlaw, right? Although it definitely caused a big target to be on your forehead, but you didn't want to be one of the ones that went along with the program, did you? Not if you had morals or ethics guiding you. Take off. Take off, eh? Right on. Hoser. Bob and Doug. Remember what was it? SCTV. Remember that show? You remember? Member berries? Yeah. Yeah, that was a good show. You gotta lighten things up, right? This is very, infuriating subject matter. So that's why I tend to, joke around a little bit, because you gotta kind of moderate that, right? You got to moderate it, because bad enough I'm already getting enough gray hairs. You don't want to make things any worse. Anyways, then they brought in BLM and dropped crates of bricks throughout the city. Who does that? Yeah, great point, Mad Gatter. Hey, what's going on, Danny Ringus? Thanks for joining the stream, man. Really appreciate that. They really think people are stupid. There definitely are a lot of retarded, brainwashed idiots, but most people are just people. I agree, but that's the other thing. I mean, they use these polls to create political cover, as we know, too, to give people the illusion that, hey, most people are on board with these stuff. And the sad part of it, and I'll have that here, it's linked in the description as well. But yeah, even after all these truths and facts come out, and what the Judge Mosley said, that the invocation of the Emergencies Act was unconstitutional and unreasonable and infringed on Canadians' Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Angus Reed did another poll, and still, a substantial portion of the Canadian population, enough that they could form majority, right, believe that it was okay, and it was right, and it was just to do so. So there's that, folks. Like I say, we still live in a country where a lot of our fellow citizens are not just willing to accept that, that kind of stuff happened already, but if they still accept that it was legitimate to do something that we know wasn't, well, imagine what they're willing to go along with, subsequent to that. That should concern us all. That's kind of the sad part of a democracy. I understand the concept, but if you want mob rule, well, you better make sure the mob is actually genuinely informed and at least somewhat intelligent and ethical, right? Because in the absence of those things, well, it's just tyranny by the mob. It's just mob or majority rule. That's all it is. It's sanctioned tyranny. That's all it is, folks. Digital Globe. Hey, what's going on, BB? Hey, bud, been a long time. Glad to see you're still doing your thing. Sure am. And I thank you very much for joining the stream as well. Actually, if you folks that now that you're here, if you wouldn't mind, just hit that old like button. I'm actually surprised, even on the old YouTube, even though my channel was, like it's kind of placed in the ether a little bit. I am starting to get a little bit more. I was checking some of my analytics, and I'm actually certain weeks I'm getting more subscribers than are being knocked off based on the fact that once again my channel, a lot of people maybe close their accounts or whatever, but I'm doing pretty well. And I noticed that even my Facebook page, although it's being messed with now, I can't post on my Facebook page. The only way I could is I had to go in through. Actually, I'm not going to tell you how I was able to do it because they might find a way to fuck that up too. But yeah, for some reason I've been locked out of being able to post on my Canadian Libertarian Facebook page for the last 3 days. And yeah, I appealed the decision that it was when I did that live stream with Mark Vandermas about the Israeli Gaza conflict and all that. I don't know, got some kind of copyright thing. I don't know what it was because, as you know, I never have these kinds of issues, but for some reason I had it, so I appealed it, and wow, what a disaster that is. But yeah, I'm still doing my thing, and like I say, it's a beautiful thing now too that I also have redundancy. So, once again, I'm not just on YouTube, but I'm on X, live streaming X. I should have checked that. I'm live streaming on X, YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. And once again, it's nice. Thanks. Rumble is actually an excellent alternative in terms of doing these live streams and having that material backed up, because at least based on the kind of people running Rumble is I know that I don't have to worry about them, suppressing or getting rid of my content because I practice wrong think or wrong speak, right? Very true, unfortunately. Actually, let me throw these glasses back on. Why not? That's how the Soviets started they brainwashed the kids first through the local schools and slowly spread. Exactly. Good point, Denny. Good point. And once again, it's not just in Russia. It takes place here as well. It's just done much more subtly, right? Yeah. Common Core. Where'd that go? Common Core, 2 plus 2 is 5. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What they did at the past is what they're doing now through the schools called. Yep, bang on. This country and everything happened is only part of a bigger worldwide picture, and many simply don't know. So true. And I mean, you can understand that some people just don't have the time to think about these things. But that's what I don't understand is why the hell is it that these people don't have anyone in their life that are trying to, properly educate and inform them? I mean, we live in the information age, for crying out loud. It should not be that hard to get people up to speed, even those, that maybe don't have a whole lot of time, right? But if you have someone that you trust in your life, here's the thing. So there's obviously a lot of people in this country that don't have even one person that they trust who are like us, who actually know what freedom is all about and are willing to speak out and openly about what it is, right? That's a sad, sad, sad take on things. It's a sad reality that, because obviously if you trust the person, let's say an unvaccinated person, and you say, hey, listen, there's no proof that, and there never has been any proof that the shots, stop transmission or prevent you from getting COVID, then that should be enough to cause the person to take a moment of pause and say, yeah, really? Well, if that's the case, then that makes a lot of these things that the government's doing very unethical, right? But the fact that they don't seem to have anyone in their life to tell them that, well, that's the other thing. A lot of people like to function in an echo chamber. That's one area where we libertarians in particular, but even, critical thinkers or people who are more independent minded, that's the area where we shine, right? Because we don't typically function in an echo chamber. Actually, that's how we expand our knowledge and our wisdom, is by listening to alternative perspectives and opinions and information. So, but maybe that is the biggest thing, right? Is that a lot of people just want to function in an echo chamber. They don't want to have their preconceived notions or their perspectives challenged, because then it would, upset the apple cart, so to speak, and maybe cause some angst and some uncomfortableness when they're around their peers or the people that the cohorts that they typically associate with. Right on, right on. Anyway, so I'm going to, once again, thanks for all the comments. But yeah, I'm just going to pop back in here because we got to keep this in mind too. I wanted to bring this one up. Keep all this, once again, this is all pertaining to the subject matter at hand. So once again, perceived threat ceases. What? So what? CSIS don't even understand what the military did, right? This is not perceived. This is real. This was reported on, right? This is fact. So not perceived ceases, reality. But everyone remember this? I'm sure a lot of you do. Military leaders saw a pandemic as unique opportunity to test propaganda techniques on Canadians, Forces report says. A plan devised by the Canadian Joint Operational Command relied on propaganda techniques similar to those employed during the Afghanistan War. So this was reported by David Pugliese from the Ottawa Citizen this was back September 27th, 2021. So this was known, right? Years ago. Canadian military leaders saw the pandemic as a unique opportunity to test out propaganda techniques on an unsuspecting public, a newly released Canadian Forces report concludes. The federal government never asked for the so-called information operatives campaign, nor did Cabinet authorize the initiative developed during the COVID-19 pandemic by the Canadian Joint Operations Command, then headed by Lieutenant General Mike Rouleau. But military commanders believed they didn't need to get approval from higher authorities to develop and proceed with their plan, retired Major General Daniel Goslin, who was brought in to investigate the scheme, concluded on his report. The propaganda plans was developed and put in place in April 2020, even though the Canadian Forces had already acknowledged that information operations and targeting policies and doctrines are aimed at adversaries and have a limited application in a domestic concept. A copy of the December 2020 Goslin investigation, as well as other related documents, was obtained by this newspaper using the access to information. So anyways, folks, I don't have to read that. Once again, I've covered this in multiple live streams in the past, but yes, this will be linked in the description below as well. And of course, same goes for the original article, the CSIS report, and I'll actually close some of these up here. Same with the CSIS mandate. And once again, this is all stuff that's really important to have access to. And I just wanted to point out, because it's not just CSIS, it's not just the military, it's not just government, and it's not just the media. So let me bring this up. All you have to do is just do a simple Google search. So even the RCMP was actively involved in tyrannizing Canadians. Peaceful Canadians who were not doing anything wrong, right? And all you have to do if you want to have that, made very clear is just type in RCMP pasture and COVID policy. Those 4 words is all I had to type into Google, and look at the myriad of examples. Alberta pastor who defied COVID-19 rules, refused bail. So this was James Coates, the pastor of Grace Life Church outside Edmonton, remains in custody. So, put in jail for not going along, for not obeying these authoritarian mandates and these edicts. This another one, BC pastor. This is so that was Alberta. This one's a BC pastor found liable for hosting worship service, right? There's once again, now these won't be linked because once again, you can just type all this up and find anyone. There's never ending examples, folks. This one, CTV News. Court dismisses a case against NB pastor accused of ignoring, the authoritarian mandates. Now, luckily, a court dismissed that case, right? I suppose they didn't want to have that precedent set that they set in stone in law that they infringed on New Brunswick pastors' inherent rights and freedoms. Edmonton area pastor arrested, charged after repeatedly, not obeying these authoritarian mandates. Another one, RCMP charge, Alberta. Pastor ticketed for allegedly breaching Quarantine Act. Maui says church ignored COVID-19 rules again. New Brunswick pastor jailed for a week as judge considers whatever the heck anyways. Alberta government sought to censor pastor accused of. Pastor in Edmonton area group representing Alberta. Anyways, Steinbach, Manitoba pastor says RCMP is blocking God. I mean, it's once again, you see the countless examples of. Is that open? Oh, sorry. I did not have that shared, did I? Here, actually, I thought I had that shared. Yeah, so actually, I'll go back up and just run down it real quickly. I noticed that I didn't actually hit the share button. So, anyways, here it is. Alberta pasture defied COVID-19 rules. I'll just scroll down. BC pasture found liable. Court dismisses case against NB. Of course, all the myriad of the establishment media reporting on it. Edmonton area pasture arrested. RCMP charged Alberta pasture. Ticketed for breach quarantine. Mountie says church. New Brunswick pasture jailed. So as you can see, once again, it just goes on and 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 on. So once again, I'll just take that off. But there's like I say, so many examples that it'd be hard to even count them all. And of course, there's this. I'll bring this up. Like I say, that Nanos poll. And this is a new one. This is a new poll. This isn't, from back during COVID when people could at least, claim that they were ignorant to this knowledge, right? They just weren't informed, right? Even though if you weren't, well, that's kind of the onus is on you to maybe seek out alternative information when such things are being presented to you. But you should at least question these things, bare minimally. But if you look here, so this is once again, so this is done. Where's the date on this bad boy? Oh, here we go. Let me make sure I do have that on share. Yep. So this was a Spencer Van Dyke report here, CTV News Parliamentary Bureau writer. So this was February 9th, 2024. So once again, this is a new one. What Canadians think about the Emergencies Act, according to Nano's polling. The majority of Canadians still support the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act to shut down the so-called Freedom Convoy protests in early 2022. According to new data from Nano's research, the survey found 44% of people support the use of the act, in addition to 20% of people who somewhat support. So that in total, 64%. 64%. So yeah, that's the majority, or at least the majority of people that would take a Angus Reed poll, which, does represent the kind of people who are typically, part of the voting bloc, right? And choosing the next master or ruler. So very important to keep in mind. 6% of people somewhat oppose the use of the legislation versus 27% who said they oppose it. The numbers are similar to those gathered nearly 2 years ago in late 2022, which showed 48% of respondents support the use of the Emergency Act in response to the protest, compared to 18% who somewhat support, 7% who somewhat opposed, and 24% who oppose. So anyways, here's the breakdown right here in the chart. And once again, this too will be linked in the description of the live stream. I mean, that's quite a disturbing thing. Actually, there's another one here I got that's a CBC article, which is basically talking about the same thing. But of course, actually, let me bring this on for a little bit, because this is what, you've seen how Global News covered it, and this is how CBC covers that story. It's not just the trucker no, this is what these people at the CBC seem predisposed and overly concerned about is this pretending that people are out there actively targeting, or what, seeking to use violence against, people of the LGBTQ community. You can't help but think, is it projection? Is it because CBC is chock right fill with people who would identify as one of these LGBT? You just know that that's more than likely the case for a lot of them, right? So yeah, I'll just read a little bit here. CSIS warns that views tab StreamYard. Okay. So CSIS warns that the anti-gender movement poses a threat of extreme violence. So first of all, what in the hell is an anti-gender movement? Like, what a fucking stupid way to word it. What? Canadians are against gender? No, not at all. We all acknowledge that there's two genders, right? But to pretend to paint this as people being against, they're anti-gender. Like, think about the many different ways that you could, headline this particular article. But no, this Catherine Tunney, right? This establishment hack. Once again, this was posted February 15th, 2024. This establishment hack chose to go with the headline, CSIS warns that the anti-gender movement poses a threat. And once again, using the words extreme violence. Like, so just Holy fucking drama queen, right? You are a drama queen, and anyone in CSIS that would even go along with this kind of headline or title is, yeah, you're a drama queen yourself. And I guess you should wear that label, not with any pride, but it's completely applicable for sure. Intelligence agency says risk with almost certain. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Intelligence agency says risk will almost certainly continue over the coming year. Well, what the fuck? What is the risk already? Have you? I mean, come on. We're the kind of people typically, right, that pay attention to what's going on. I read the news every day from some of these, and a lot of it from these establishment hacks. And I have yet to see all this rampant reporting of this rampant, widespread violence against people in the LGBTQ. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. So where is it? Where is it? I mean, even if you could find the odd one-off example, that is not representative of Canada as a whole. But yet, that's the way the people that want to stand up for their freedoms, that's how it's being painted. That's how it's being framed. Canada's intelligence agency is warning that extremists could inspire and encourage serious violence against the 2S, like, the 2S LGBTQI plus community. Wow. I mean, first of all, if you are any one of these people, don't you think you should just be acknowledged as an individual and not just someone as part of this whatever community, right? I mean, come on. A threat the Canadian Security Intelligence Service says almost certainly will continue over the coming year. CSIS's comments come as provincial policies on gender-affirming surgeries and pronoun preferences are being hotly debated across the country. CSIS assesses that the violent threat posed by the anti-gender movement is almost certain to continue over the coming year, and that violent actors may be inspired by the University of Waterloo attack to carry out their own extreme violence against the whatever community or against other targets they view as representative of the gender ideology agenda, said CSIS spokesperson Eric Balsam in an email to CBC News. So one example, and I knew they were going to use that example. So this is what I mean. They use one example of something, and bad things happen to all kinds of people just because these people identify. Think about how many people are oppressed or targeted for lots of things, right? Lots of things. I mean, how come, the Jewish community is not included here, right? Or how come other people, like the unvaccinated, you don't see nothing in terms of that, but that, once again, the unvaccinated were genuinely targeted. And not just by some lone wolf individual, but by government itself. The biggest bullies on the block. But no concern for that, right? A former University of Waterloo student accused of unleashing on a gender studies class with a knife last summer sent an associate professor and 2 students to hospital, now faces 11 terrorism charges. Wow. And you got to think, the way all this is framed too, it's like the way, if you think about this, the way these kinds of stories are framed, it's almost like they're trying to elicit a hostile response. It's almost like they're trying to poke or prod Canadians, right? Because they're constantly trying to paint, right, that people in these identity politics groups are all just oppressed, poor, helpless victims, but everyone else are just like what? Vile, evil tyrants or vindictive, criminal-minded, violent extremists, right? I mean, what a way to paint that. To me, I think what they're doing is they're the ones that are genuinely responsible for painting the targets on these groups that they claim to be trying to protect. Balsam said that while violent rhetoric does not always lead to violence, the ecosystem of violent rhetoric within the anti-gender movement, compound with other extreme worldviews, can lead to serious violence. CSIS assesses that exposure to groups and individuals espousing anti-gender extremist rhetoric could inspire and encourage serious violence against the 2S LGBTQI plus community or against those who are viewed as supporters of pro-gender ideology policies and events, he said. Balsam was commenting on a document drafted by the Integrated Terrorism Assessment Center, ITAC, and obtained by CBC News through an access to information request. ITAC, made up of intelligence authorities, is set up to keep tabs on threat actors, intentions, and capabilities, and to review classified and open source information to estimate the likelihood of a terrorist attack in Canada. Oh boy. Once again, terrorist. Read what a terrorist, the actual defined definition, the dictionary definition of a terrorist, right? And you'll see, aren't you just talking about political gangs? Aren't you just talking about people who want the foreign governments to be the rulers? Because it literally, like, it describes them to a T. According to the document, the center was monitoring the potential for an attack on violent assaults at pride celebrations, parades, and nightclubs across the country last summer. Sections of the document have been redacted. Trans and drag communities in Canada have been the target of several online threats and real-world intimidation tactics in recent months, says the document. So, online threats, right? Well, if someone's threatening someone, investigate those individuals, but don't try to paint that as representative of people who are standing up for their freedom or oppose some of this and gender ideology shit. And real world intimidation? Really? What is the intimidation? Once again, speaking vocally in opposition to this stuff? Is that it? Anti-bloc narratives remain a common theme in violent rhetoric espoused by white nationalists, neo-Nazis, the freedom movement, and networks such as Diagolon and QAnon, right? So see how they're trying to do that? White nationalists. So think about what a white nationalist is, right? I mean, there's lots of gray area in there, no doubt. or there's something they want to conjure up an image in your head, right? So Nazi, Hitler, he's a white nationalist, right? Very nationalist, very socialist, all that. But in reality, what a nationalist is, the white is just the pigment of their skin, right? But a nationalist is just someone who's very much about the flag, right? Very much about their country, very much they would perceive themselves as, maybe a patriot, right? They care about their country, right? The kind of people who would probably actively join the military or other organizations such as CSIS or the RCMP or to form government, right? A lot of people, very nationalists in their mindset, who want to join these organizations. A lot of them are very white. So once again, are they projecting? Got to remember, when you're pointing your finger at someone else, well, you got three other ones pointing back, right? ITAC went on to say that those who embrace religiously motivated violent extremism in Canada continue to view members of the community as desirable targets. So now they're bringing religious. So think about what they're trying to do here. So they're trying to take anyone who's white and is a nationalist and neo-Nazis. First of all, like calling people like they're anti this stuff as neo-Nazis, while Trudeau, the conservatives, the Trudeau liberals, the conservatives, the NDP, the Bloc, all of them stood there in the legislature and standing ovation, not even just major applause, but I mean a standing ovation. And wasn't it twice, actually? I think it was twice, for an actual Nazi, genuine, provably so, that was living in Canada under the radar. Nope, not being targeted for his crimes against humanity, his crimes against, whether it's the Jewish people, the Polish people, whoever else he oppressed under the genuine, real Nazi regime of from 1939 to 45 under that genuine, under the Hitler regime, right? No, he gets a full standing ovation and applause, right? While people are just against some of this ideological shit jammed down their kids' throat and this woke ideology. Oh no, they're the neo-Nazis. The freedom movement. So anyone that, once again, just stand up for the freedom, you, me, anyone that cares about their freedoms and are standing in full opposition to tyranny, we're the bad people, right? And networks such as Diagolon, which, as far as I know, I don't know much about it. I used to have conversations back in the day with a couple of those gentlemen, I think, that are part of it. Was it Rance Derrick and Jeremy McKenzie? And I'm not sure if there was a couple other ones there. I'm not sure if AJ was part of that or not. But I mean, as far as I know, it was a joke. They made this Diagolon thing as an actual joke to troll the establishment media. But yet they'll run with this, right? And QAnon, right? QAnon, you got to throw that in there. Which what's that? Right? That was something that started in the US, but that's a big deal here in Canada now, apparently, too, right? And who else? And let's tie in religiously motivated individuals. People who are what, Christians? Because what religion are you talking about? Are you talking about Muslims? Are you talking about people who practice Judaism? No. What they're trying to suggest is, them darn Christians that didn't go along with the program, right? That didn't goose step in line with everyone else. That's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to paint all these people as they're the bad people, right? They're the threats. Yeah. No, not government, not the actual actors and CSIS or RCMP who are your genuine threats to your freedoms and liberty. No, misdirection. Look, don't look over here, look over there, right? Anyways, yeah, that's enough of that. But I'll make sure, once again, to make sure that's linked in the description as well. And this anti-hate, Ontario Tech University. Okay, so that's basically the same idea. So no, anyways, it'll be linked in the description as well. This link to this Ontario Tech University, and you'll see the article that they put forth there. And now we get another. I'll bring up another article that's now coming out. I think this one actually might have just came out this morning. Yeah, right. Yeah, today's 16th. So here's another CBC article. 2 years later, freedom movement, and once again in quotations, right? Freedom movement. Well, they keep labeling everyone as, but why don't you just say that they are the freedom movement? Why always in quotations? Anyways, 2 years later, freedom movement plans to return to Parliament Hill. Well, yeah, because the judge literally said that they had every right to do so. And the invocation of the Emergencies Act was unconstitutional, unjust, and unreasonable. So why wouldn't they? Right? They've been vindicated. Were you scared of the hot tubs? Is it the bouncy castle? Oh, tell me where it hurts. Is it all the fun and laughter and music and dancing? Is that what it is? Is that what it is? Oh, yeah. Miserable people can't stand to see other people happy. That is a very, very well proven fact, and in particular here in Canada, especially in recent years. Ottawa police have robust plan to deal with planned weekend gathering. Being reported by David Fraser, February 16th, 2024. 2 years after police moved in to end the protest movement that became known as the Freedom Convoy, some of the same people who took part say they'll return to Parliament Hill to mark the anniversary. While organizers of the reunion hesitate to put a figure on the number of protesters they're expecting this weekend, the Ottawa Police Services, OSP, said it's aware of social media posts and other activity related to a demonstration on Saturday. In a statement to CBC, police say they've consulted with municipal, provincial, and federal partners and are preparing accordingly. We are monitoring information and intelligence and have a robust plan in place to deal with any demonstrations and to ensure public safety, OPS said. We also have an operational plan to address the possibility of a vehicle-based demonstration that will ensure that there is no vehicle-based protest in the downtown core. One of the organizers, Chris Dacey, told CBC he's been in contact with police to plan a safe, lawful, and peaceful event and is unaware of any planned protest actions involving vehicles. Well, there you go. Police confirm their planning includes communication with some of the organizers. We provide them with our expectations and direction on what is lawful and what will not be permitted, OPS said. We appreciate the cooperation of organizers and participants as well as the patience of nearby residents and businesses that may be impacted by temporary road closures. Protest organizers say a convoy of vehicles is expected to travel to Ottawa from southern Ontario with plans to gather at the Capital City Bikers Church in Vanier before moving to Parliament Hill. A poster advertising the event has been widely shared on social media platforms. Melissa McKee, co-pastor of the church, said one of the organizers coming from out of town has asked people to bring donations. We had nothing to do with that, McKee said. We didn't even know it was happening. Nevertheless, McKee said she'll be on Parliament Hill this weekend because it belongs to us. A lot has transpired in the last 2 years, and when I think of what happened there during convoy and after, I feel like it's the battleground, she said. To go there and plant the Canadian flag, that's what I feel like we'll be doing. Bethan Nodwell, who helped organize the Freedom Convoy in 2022 that blocked large swaths of the city's downtown core and was ended only after the federal government invoked the Emergency Act, is expecting the anniversary event to be a particularly positive and lighthearted. Right on. Nodwell said she's expecting a couple hundred people to attend the event. So it's right. It's just a couple hundred people, whatever, man. Don't get your panties in a bunch over that. It's going to be fun and playful. And there'll be speeches and music, she said. I don't expect anything too crazy, to be honest, but I think that there'll be a really celebratory energy in the crowd. She cited a recent federal court decision that found the Liberal government's use of the Emergency Act in early 2022 to clear convoy protesters was unreasonable and infringed on their charter rights as one reason for optimism. The federal government is appealing that decision. Nodwell and other supporters are also encouraged by a lawsuit launched this week by a Calgary-based firm on behalf of 24 people and businesses alleging they were subjected to the unreasonable use of the Emergency Act. The lawsuit, which names Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, cabinet ministers, Chrystia Freeland as well, banks and others as defendants, seeks compensation of up to $1.7 million for each plaintiff. Now, once again, I'll just point out, we'll be the ones paying it, but you know what? We're already forced to pay for so much. At least this would be going to a good cause, right? Because it's definitely not coming out of any of the, the corrupt politicians that cause that kind of tyranny. It won't be coming out of Trudeau's trust fund, that's for sure. A federal committee that decides how Parliament Hill is used confirmed Thursday afternoon that it had received an approved 4 events requested for Friday and Saturday, but said the details of those applications are confidential. In a statement, Krista Tanaka, Associate Director of Traffic Services for Ottawa, said the city had not received any permit request for a demonstration related to the freedom movement on February 16th or 17th, but confirmed 3 permits had been issued for unrelated demonstrations, including one near the Chinese embassy and another in the city's West End. Organizers of demonstrations do not technically require a permit to protest. Well, duh! No, you don't need government permission to protest against government. Hello, Captain Obvious. Right? Jeez. Oh, my goodness. The right to peacefully demonstrate falls under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Yeah. The planned event comes days after the public release of a CSIS report describing the movement as one that's against perceived government overreach. Perceived. Once again, why the perceived? It is now legally set in fact and precedent that it wasn't just perceived, it was real. I mean, come on, David Fraser. Like, this is why nobody trusts people like you in the established media. You can't even properly represent things, based on even your own government and your own, like, even the judges, that are employed by the government. They're the ones that are telling you. It's not even, people in the freedom movement's opinions or perspective, or any lawyers stand in defense of the people in the freedom movement. No, it's the very judge, the federal judge, that said that. So can you, really though? Unbelievable. While this perceived tyranny is widespread across the movement, other narratives are becoming increasingly common among adherents, according to the April 2023 brief titled Defining the Freedom Movement. While the protesters' main motivation 2 years ago was the opposition of COVID-19 mandates, the report says the movement has turned its attention to several other issues. Other issues include gender politics, globalization, and communism. Anyways, David here was so exuberant and excited to type out his, apologist article to defend government and use their own rhetoric, right? According to you take a couple deep breaths, David. Proofread your shit before you publish it, right? But no. Once again, these can't expect to hold them to a standard that even someone like myself tries to. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any stretch, but I at least try to hold myself to a higher standard than most of these hacks in the established media do. That is for certain. That is for certain. So anyways, once again, this will be linked in the description of the video as well. Actually, I have another thing in terms of federal government. So just to let you know, I'll actually save this one for an actual future live stream. But yeah, if you think Bill C-11 and C-18, was all the attempts that the federal government were taking in terms of infringing on our freedom of speech and suppression of content, and the whole thing, how that played out, both of those bills, and how much of infringement they too are on our inherent rights and freedoms. But they're also trying to come up with another one. This one's going to be experts urge federal government to pursue moderate, judicious approach to harmful content online. So it's one of these online harms bills that they're going to come. And you just know the way that's going to be worded, that it too is going to be a major threat to not just our freedoms, but it's also going to be used, to try to silence anyone who dissents, right? So it completely does go along with this stuff. But once again, that's kind of a subject matter where I'm going to deal with in another live stream. And I will just add that this one here, let me just bring it on real quick. This is a True North article, basically pertained to the same kind of stuff, but a little bit of added context and information in this one as opposed to the ones I've already shared. So I figure I might as well share it as well. CSIS admits to monitoring parental rights activists, compares them to neo-Nazis. So it was kind of alluding to that, and I think it was even the CBC News article. This is reported by Cosmin de Cerza, February 15, 2024. Canada's top intelligence agency admitted it is closely monitoring the activities of activists and groups associated with the parents' rights movement, particularly those opposing radical gender ideology. Recent reports from CBC shed light on a document from the Integrated Terrorism Assessment Center responsible for preventing terrorist activities in Canada. The report lumped together the freedom movement with extremist groups like neo-Nazis and QAnon. Anyway, so I guess actually this will be linked as well. So I guess it kind of does reference basically the same kind of information I was giving you before. Now, without further ado, I did want to share a couple of these because this is really important as it pertains to the madness of the crowd, like I was mentioning before, and how people can be convinced to do some terrible things, if they perceive or believe that they're in the majority, or someone in authority tells them that it's okay to do so, right? And of course, that definitely pertains to what's taking place today under the Trudeau regime, and even some of the provincial regimes, I'll add. So yeah, so this is the Stanley Milgram experiment.
When I learn of incidents such as the massacre of millions of men, women, and children perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II, how is it possible, I ask myself, that ordinary people who are courteous and decent in everyday life can act callously, inhumanely, without any limitations of conscience? Now, there are some studies in my discipline, social psychology, that seem to provide a clue to this question. The problem I wanted to study was a little different, went a little bit further. It was the issue of authority. Under what conditions would a person obey authority who commanded actions that went against conscience? These are exactly the questions that I wanted to investigate at Yale University.
It is May 1962. An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University. The subjects are 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 residing in the greater New Haven area.
Psychologists have developed several theories to explain how people learn. One theory is that people learn things correctly whenever they get punished for making a mistake.
40 years later, Milgram's infamous experiment, obedience, is still taught in classrooms around the world.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please?
And yet people still continue to repeat those mistakes.
All right, now the next thing we'll have to do is set the learner up so that he can get some sort of punishment.
What inspired Milgram, I would say there were a number of factors. One of them is he was very ambitious. He wanted to make a mark in social psychology. And he wanted, as he wrote to one friend, he wanted to come up with the boldest experiment that he could think of.
Would you roll up your right sleeve, please? This electrode is connected to the shock generator in the next room. And this electrode paste is to provide a good contact to avoid any blister or burn. Do you have any questions now before we go into the next room?
About 2 years ago, I was at the Veterans Hospital in West Haven. And while there, they detected a heart condition. There's nothing serious, but as long as I'm having these shocks, how strong are they? How dangerous are they?
Well, no, although they may be painful, they're not dangerous. Anything else?
No, that's all.
All right, teacher, would you take the test and be seated in front of the shock generator, please, in the next room?
But the experiment was rigged.
The victim was an accomplice of the experiment. The victim, according to plan, provided many wrong answers. His verbal responses were standardized on tape, and each protest was coordinated to a particular voltage level on the shock generator.
Now, as teacher, you were seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator. Its essential feature is a line of switches that goes from 15 volts to 450 volts, and a set of verbal designations that goes from slight shock to moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, and finally XXX, danger severe shock. Your job, the experimenter explains to you, is a word pair test. If he gets each answer correctly, fine, you move on to the next pair. But if he makes a mistake, you are instructed to give him an electric shock, starting with 15 volts, and you increase the shock one step on each error.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105. Hard hit. Just how far can you go in this thing?
As far as is necessary.
What do you mean as far as is that?
Milgram was very much aware that obedience is a necessary ingredient for society to function. But he focused on the darker side of obedience.
Incorrect. 150 volts. Sad face.
Wait a minute. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now.
It's absolutely essential that you continue. You got no other choice, teacher.
Oh, I have a lot of choices. My number one choice is that I wouldn't go on if I thought he was being harmed.
Now, this man makes disobedience seem a very rational and simple deed. Now, other subjects respond quite differently to the experimenter's authority.
Wrong. It's hair. 75 volts, Jim. You don't know.
Please continue.
Some psychologists were troubled by the ethics of it. Many, if not most subjects, found it a highly stressful, conflicted experience. People are stammering, stuttering, laughing hysterically and inappropriately.
150 volts.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now. Get me out of here, please. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let
Go
me
on.
out. Let me out.
Clearly, when we say people went to the top of the shock board, it wasn't like they were going blithely, sadistically. People went stop and go, stop and go. They were in a state of conflict, which created a tremendous amount of stress.
Wrong. Up to 180 volts.
Please continue, teacher.
180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Stand it up. I'm not going to kill that man there.
According to Milgram, one of the things that's a prerequisite for carrying out acts that are evil is to shed responsibility from your shoulders and hand it over to the person in charge.
I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next one, slow.
He didn't hold any gun to anybody's head. Just the fact that he conveyed a sense of authority. Roughly 65% of the people went all the way to the top of the shock board.
450 volts. That's it.
Now continue using the last switch on the board, please. The 450 switch for each wrong answer. Continue, please.
I'm not getting no answer. Don't the man's health mean anything?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we
But
must...
he might be dead in there.
Yeah, so there's that one. Now, once again, that's just one example. And that showed, once again, as you've seen there, 66, so a full 2/3 of participants were willing to basically introduce something that had the potential, right, to kill that individual, right? Why? Because they were told to do so by someone they perceived as being in a position of authority. And that is just one example. The other example, of course, and I'll bring that up now, is I'm not sure if you folks, a lot of people are familiar with the Stanley Milgram experiment, but maybe lesser people are familiar with the Stanford prison experiment, which is basically something similar or along the same lines.
In 2015, the Stanford prison experiment was released in theaters. The movie detailed the infamous 1971 experiment in which 24 college students were put in prison. Now, while the experiment was supposed to last for 2 weeks, it was terminated after 6 days due to psychological effects that it was having on both the guards and the prisoners. So, what actually happened during the Stanford prison experiment? Why is it so infamous? And does the movie get everything right, or is it just a dramatization? This video will briefly explain the experiment, its impact on the world of psychology, and the controversy that it's facing 45 years in the future. So, first off, what is the Stanford prison experiment? After Milgram's experiment rocked the world of psychology, many people were left with questions about obedience, power dynamics, and the abuse of power. Philip Zimbardo, a professor at Stanford, wanted to then explore these questions further, and with a grant from the Navy, Zimbardo set up something called the Stanford Prison Experiment. He wanted to see, could a person's role influence their behavior? Zimbardo and his team interviewed 70 applicants at Stanford who were willing to participate in the study for 14 days and receive $15 a day. They wanted to make sure that they chose the brightest and the most mentally sound participants. And after narrowing down their applicants to 24, the researchers flipped a coin and assigned the roles. Half of the participants would be prisoners, and the other half would be guards. Now, the researchers then set up a basement at Stanford to make it look like a real prison. They were very serious about treating the experiment like a simulation. Prisoners were actually arrested in public and taken into prison. They were even booked, fingerprinted, and strip searched. Now, Zimbardo's team also gave prisoners numbers that were meant to be used instead of their real name. They claimed that it would help give the prisoners a sense of anonymity and help the experiment. Guards had pretty much free reign over how they could treat the prisoners, while they had two main rules. They could not hit the prisoners, and they could not put prisoners in solitary confinement for more than an hour. Philip Zimbardo played the role of the prison superintendent. His graduate students and research partners also played roles as members of the parole board and the prison warden. Prisoners were tasked with certain activities like writing a letter home to their visitors and making a case to the parole board about why they should be let off. Guards also subjected the prisoners to counts in which they forced the prisoners to do jumping jacks, push-ups, and other degrading tasks. Now, it did not take long for these guards to start to abuse their power. Within one day, a guard actually hit one of the prisoners with his nightstick. On the second day, the prisoners tried to rebel, and so their beds were taken away. To punish these prisoners, the guards shot a fire extinguisher into the cell. Guards used physical and psychological abuse, including things like sleep deprivation, to punish and intimidate the prisoners throughout the study. The prisoners were forced to wear dressings and stocking caps the whole time. And at some point, the guards would put bags over the prisoners' heads. And since the study has ended, it has since been compared to actions at the Abu Ghraib detention center. Zimbardo has written about the case and its parallels to the prison experiment since. So why did this experiment get shut down? Well, very quickly, the guards started to abuse their power. The prisoners started to spiral. On the third day, prisoner number 8612 started to cry and scream uncontrollably. He threatened to harm himself and call a lawyer. To avoid potential psychological damage or a lawsuit, he was let go. 2 other prisoners were let go in the next 2 days. One actually refused to eat. And on the 5th day, Zimbardo's girlfriend, which was actually his former student, came to visit the experiment. Zimbardo and his team had been monitoring the experiment and playing their roles in it 24/7. And when she saw the horrors that was going on in the prison, she asked Zimbardo to end the experiment immediately. She even threatened to break up with him. Well, eventually on the 6th day, he ended the experiment. This experiment showed the world how quickly people can abuse power when it's given to them. But it remains as one of the most controversial experiments in the world of psychology. And there's a few reasons why. The first one is obvious, and it's the case for psychological abuse that the prisoners endured during the study. Is it ethical to put human subjects through that kind of distress and trauma, so much so that many couldn't even endure the experiment? Now, Zimbardo claims that none of the participants have suffered long-term psychological consequences, but the point still stands. And in more recent years, critics have come forward to say that the results were not as natural as Zimbardo and their team may want you to think. Transcripts and audio recordings from the Stanford prison experiment show that Zimbardo's team coached these guards. They told them to be tough for the sake of the experiment. Even the prisoners may have been faking their responses. Prisoner number 8612, who is most well known for his blood-curdling quote, "I'm burning up inside." He has come forward to say that his time in the Stanford County Jail was more of an improv exercise. Many critics have likened the experiment to a drama rather than a legitimate psychology experiment. Carlo Prescott, the experiment's prison consultant, has also come forward to say that the experiment's more cruel treatments were not naturally thought up and executed by the guards alone. He wrote the following in an op-ed. Ideas such as bags being placed over the heads of prisoners, inmates being bound together with chains, and buckets being used in place of toilets in their cells were all experiences of mine at the old Spanish jail section of San Quentin, and which I dutifully shared with the Stanford Prison Experiment Brain Trust months before the experiment started. To allege that all these carefully tested, psychologically solid, upper-middle-class Caucasian guards dreamed this up on their own is absurd. So you can take that for what you will. But let's talk a little bit about the lasting effect of the Stanford Prison Experiment. It seems to have raised more questions than it answered. Where should psychologists draw the line when it comes to subjecting participants to distress for science? And how easily can psychologists blur the lines of an experiment versus a simulation or a drama? And if the Stanford Prison Experiment doesn't exactly answer its original questions about power dynamics and obedience, what similar experiments can? These are just some of the questions that psychologists...
So anyways, folks, like I say, those are just two examples. And yeah, I just wanted to point out, because those are just two, but we don't even need those. Those were just, once again, these were experiments. So, both should be taken with a grain of salt. They're not 100% conclusive, but the real world experiences of the 20th century under Nazism, fascism, communism, and socialism, right? And in modern day Canada's democracy, these are all real world examples that aren't, a classroom experiment, right? That showed with absolute proof and clarity what people are willing to do under the pretense of being told by what they perceive as an authority, or when they believe that it's being done for benevolent reasons, or for what they're told as the greater good. So, like I say, regardless of the experiment, whether it's real world or in a classroom setting, or something that's done at a college or a university, we are all very well aware of the fact that humans are not just fallible, but highly susceptible, and a large portion, matter of fact, the majority, which should be causing concern for anyone, right, who openly and vocally cheers on democracy. If you understand the madness of the crowd, once again, as the book title of Douglas Murray suggests, and how the collective, how they can tyrannize the minority, how easily and susceptible that is to happen, or people are to not just allowed to happen, but to carry out or play a role in it, then that should be enough for people to finally stand up and say, you know what? Even if you're a benefactor right now, right? Maybe you agree with the mob in tyrannizing the other. We always got to keep in mind that can be flipped like a switch at any time. And that exact same kind of thing can be used against you to infringe upon your inherent rights and freedoms and liberties. Anyways, folks, I'm going to tie this stream up. I really appreciate you folks joining this. And like I said, this is really important. And I will mention once again, I'm looking forward to talking to a couple gentlemen, Daniel and the Gray Matter podcast. We're going to have some really important discussions and conversations, and I'm going to be looking forward for even more conversations going forward, because there's other people that I've been trying to reach out to, or at least a couple, and a few more that I'm on the top of my head thinking that, yeah, it'd probably be a worthwhile discussion and something that you folks would be interested in. Anyways, you folks enjoy. What's today? Friday, right? Yeah. So I guess enjoy your weekend. I might still go live tomorrow. I already have the live stream set up, and even though Daniel he can't join me because he's sick, I might still, start that live stream. But if not, if I change my mind, I will cancel it beforehand, and we'll get to doing it at another time. Anyways, you folks have a great rest of your weekend. This is the Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.